So today I'm going to be covering a game between the Beastmen and the High Elves played on my ranked ladder. You can find more information on that on my Discord. Now, there's going to be a lot of things going on in this battle, so the main focus is going to be composite unit squads. The sort of explanation for this is the combination of multiple units to get more work done than they can individually. So as you can see over here, we have the combination of Wargore and Tuskor chariots and the general mobility force of the Beastmen, along with the Manticores in the center. And for the Dark Elves, it's going to be mostly their cavalry and their Dark Riders as one squad, and the Manticores plus Marathi as the other. Now, starting right off, the battle has already gone underway, and we are seeing a bit of a fight here on the left flank. Now, the Dark Riders and Cold One Knights do get routed off, which is a pretty big heavy loss for the Dark Elves, and that means that one of their core groups is already starting to collapse, with the Dark Riders now getting chased by dogs. A small win for the Dark Elves, though, is that they have managed to catch out the Manticores, which means that the single entity fighting power is going to be a lot weaker on the forces of the Beastmen. Soul Stealer does drop on the infantry here, getting a decent amount of value, but as you will see, the infantry won't really play a huge part in the battle, since they're mostly just trading evenly. Ungor Raiders will be getting a lot of value on the Sisters of Slaughter, though, but like I said, the main focus is on the cavalry fights, and the Manticore Squads too. And as you can see with the Beastmen, they are doing quite well along this left flank. Some dogs are maneuvering to really shut down all the Dark Riders too, and by distracting them in the corner, it allows the overwhelming numbers of the Beastmen to take out all of the Dark Elf Cavalry, which means that we're seeing a trade on both sides, and it's going to be the Dark Elf Manticore Squad with Marathi up against the Beastmen's mobility, that being the Hounds, the Wargore, and the Lord, which is going to be Malagor this game. You can see his abilities down below. For Marathi, it's a very expected Soul Stealer. And as you can see in the back, the dogs are now catching out the Dark Riders, which really seals the fate of the Dark Elf ground mobility. Now, like I said, the infantry is mostly just trading evenly here, and we are seeing some more fights in the center, with the other Manticore getting completely finished off as the Dark Riders are gone. But very importantly, we have to figure out which one of these groups is going to be stronger. Of course, Marathi's Soul Stealer is going to be very strong against the basic dogs, but getting overwhelmed by sheer numbers and mobility will give the Manticores a hard time. They have a very hard time disengaging from dogs. That will likely be proving to be the downfall of the Dark Elves here, as the balance of power is now shifting very heavily to the forces of the Beastmen. Another Soul Stealer does drop 2, but actually doesn't hit too many targets. Actually, no, it's not a Soul Stealer. It's a Flock of Doom hitting some infantry and the Dark Riders. Not getting a whole ton of value, though, in general. And as you can see, the game has mostly gone to its late game stage, where there are many skirmishes going all around. But in general, I think the Beastman player here today is picking slightly better fights, with the dogs now once again just running cleanup as a sort of a unit that can help chase off routing units. They are absolutely amazing here, and this will be acting much better for Contende than the Manticores and Marathi. Like I said, the infantry don't matter very much, although in the late game, the Beastmen will be taking the lead. And it ended up being a little bit of a lie. The infantry is sort of important in the very late stages of the game, where armies tend to regroup, and especially against single entities, they will support very well. But the reason why there is so much infantry is mostly because of the fact that the dogs have been able to chase off a lot of the mobility, specifically the cavalry, and making sure that the cavalry cannot support the Dark Elf infantry. Now, there was a stray unit of spears at very high HP, not sure exactly where they came from, but they will be getting shut down fairly quickly. Some Soul Stealers are dropping, and we are getting into the very late stages now. Even though the Beastmen do have a fairly solid lead on all fronts, Malagor is not exactly and especially strong lord, and because of the double Manticore Marathi goon squad going on, the Wargore might go down too, but thankfully due to the support of some of the units here, he manages to get in a pretty solid charge and will be getting fairly nice damage against the Manticores. He will be taking quite a bit himself though, and he does end up disengaging. In fact, not getting too many hits in, and is now running to some of the supporting Beastmen forces, specifically these dog units, the Chaos Warhounds, and they will be bogging down the Manticores, giving the Wargore a little bit more of a fighting chance. Another Flock of Doom does drop too, just a tiny bit of extra damage, but the Soul Stealer will be coming in to counteract. And it will end up being a fairly close game though. One big problem though is that only a single Manticore does manage to disengage, and that means that the Wargore more or less paid for himself. The Beastmen, on the other hand, they traded out two of their Manticores early game. This does mean that they have the high infantry advantage, but it's going to be a little bit of a problem because they don't have much now to actually kill single entities, aside from bogging them down with infantry. Thankfully for the Beastmen though, most of their infantry is at high enough leadership where we won't be seeing a mass rout on their end, so it's likely that they'll be able to kill off the Manticore and Marathi without too much of an issue. Although had the infantry been a little bit more beat up, it definitely would have given them a pretty hard time. So really showing the advantages and disadvantages of the two different squad types, the mobility versus the single entity goon squad. And in this case, the Beastmen are going to be taking the lead, as now it is just Marathi and the Manticore. The Manticore does dive in onto some of the Centaurs, but honestly there are way too many spears here for them to really take the game, unless there is some sort of crazy mass route that goes down. But anyways, the Dark Elf player does tap out, supposedly not having any Soul Stealers left, and that means we can now dive into some analysis. But before that, if you enjoyed, remember to sub, and I would also like to thank the ladder sponsors. Human Boy has been hosting events on the ladder recently. If you are looking for frequent community-focused challenges, check them out. Their Discord is in the description. And AC Maiden is also providing the prize for this week's ladder event. Their help is greatly appreciated. So, although Marathi and the Manticore Squad did do quite well for themselves, just sniping out various targets, they did not make as much of an impact as the mobility forces of the Beastmen, specifically the dogs, the chariot, and the Wargore, who did exceptionally well by the end of the game. For comparison, the Dark Elf Cavalry did well, at least one unit of Dark Riders did well, but the rest of them did not do very good against the Beastmen forces, considering the fact that the cavalry is much more expensive than the Marathi squad. I think it was much more important that the Beastmen did win that initial left flank, causing a cascading effect, which eventually brought them to victory by the end of the game. The casters though, like Malagor and the Manticores, it is important to note that there were misplays there, and that they did not pay for themselves extremely well. It just goes to show that, well, it seems almost obvious, but your more expensive groups of units should receive a lot more attention and care when you go into these battles.